Parker Collins couldn't believe what he was seeing when Richard Davenport strolled into the upscale restaurant, 40 minutes late, with the most breathtaking woman he'd ever laid eyes on. His friend had mentioned bringing someone interesting to their double date, but nothing could have prepared Parker for the redhead in the emerald dress, who laughed at something Richard whispered in her ear. The sound carried across the room, genuine and warm, making Parker's heart skip a beat, which was absolutely not part of tonight's plan. Parker had arranged this double date as a favor to Richard, his oldest friend and one of San Francisco's most eligible bachelors. Richard's shipping empire had made him a millionaire many times over, but his dating life was non-existent after his very public breakup with a supermodel 6 months ago. Parker had promised to help him ease back into the dating scene with a low-pressure double date. He'd bring Melissa, the marketing executive he'd been casually seeing, and Richard would bring someone suitable. But as Parker watched Richard guide this stunning woman toward their table, he felt an immediate, unwelcome attraction. Her auburn hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and her green eyes sparkled with intelligence and humor. Parker forced himself to look away, focusing instead on Melissa, who was checking her phone with obvious impatience. "Sorry, we're late," Richard announced as they reached the table. Traffic was a nightmare. "Parker, Melissa, this is Ruby Sinclair. Ruby, meet my best friend Parker Collins and his date, Melissa." Ruby smiled warmly as she extended her hand. "It's so nice to meet you both. Richard has told me wonderful things about you, Parker." The moment their hands touched, Parker felt a jolt of electricity. He pulled away quickly, noticing that Ruby seemed to have felt it too, her eyes widening slightly before she turned to greet Melissa. "Richard tells me you're in finance," Melissa asked Ruby as they all sat down. Ruby shook her head. "Actually, I'm a marine biologist. I work at the Oceanic Institute. Richard and I met when he donated to our conservation program." Parker couldn't help but be intrigued. A beautiful woman with brains who cared about the environment. This was exactly the kind of person Richard needed, someone genuine, not another social climber attracted to his wealth. So, why did Parker feel this nagging disappointment? "Parker here is the reason I got involved with the Oceanic Institute in the first place," Richard said, clapping a hand on Parker's shoulder. "He's always pushing me to use my money for good. When he's not running his architectural firm, he's volunteering for every charitable cause in the city." Ruby's eyes met Parker's and he felt that strange connection again. "Is that right? What causes are you passionate about, Parker?" Before he could answer, Melissa interrupted with a laugh. "Parker's passionate about buildings. I swear, he can't walk down a street without pointing out architectural details that no one else notices." Parker felt his face heat up. While it was true that architecture was his life's work, Melissa made it sound like a quirky obsession rather than a profession he took pride in. "I think that's wonderful," Ruby said sincerely. "Being passionate about your work is a gift. I'm the same way about marine life. I could talk about coral reefs for hours." "Please don't encourage her," Richard groaned good-naturedly. "I've already had a 3-hour lecture on the mating habits of seahorses." Ruby laughed and playfully swatted Richard's arm. "It was 15 minutes, and you said it was fascinating." Parker watched their interaction, noting the easy camaraderie between them. They clearly got along well, which was good. Richard needed someone like Ruby in his life. So why did Parker feel this knot in his stomach? The waiter arrived to take their orders, and the conversation flowed smoothly from there. Ruby was engaging and articulate, asking thoughtful questions and listening intently to the answers. Parker found himself drawn into a discussion about sustainable architecture, a topic that usually made Melissa's eyes glaze over. The building I'm working on now is completely carbon neutral, Parker explained, his excitement growing as Ruby asked intelligent follow-up questions. We're using recycled materials and incorporating a living wall that will help purify the air. That's incredible, Ruby said, her eyes alight with genuine interest. Is it for residential or commercial use? It's a mixed-use development. Retail on the ground floor, apartments above, and a rooftop garden that residents can use to grow their own produce. Melissa sighed audibly and turned to Richard. So, tell me more about this yacht I hear you have. Is it true it has its own helipad? Parker felt a flash of embarrassment at Melissa's transparent attempt to impress Richard with her interest in his wealth. He glanced at Ruby, expecting to see judgment in her eyes, but instead found understanding and a hint of amusement. Richard launched into a description of his yacht, which did indeed have a helipad, while Parker and Ruby exchanged a look that felt conspiratorial, as if they were sharing a private joke. "You sail?" Ruby asked Parker quietly while Richard and Melissa chatted. "I used to. My grandfather taught me when I was a kid. I haven't been out on the water in years, though. You should come out with us sometime. Richard's been teaching me, and I'm hopeless. I could use a fellow student." The invitation was innocent enough, but Parker felt a surge of conflicting emotions. The thought of spending time with Ruby was appealing, but she was Richard's date, potentially his future girlfriend. Parker had no business feeling this attraction to her. "That sounds fun," he said noncommittally, forcing himself to look away from her captivating green eyes. The dinner continued, and Parker tried his best to focus on Melissa, to be attentive and engaged. But his gaze kept drifting to Ruby, drawn by her laugh or the animated way she used her hands when she spoke. Each time their eyes met, he felt that same inexplicable connection. As they were finishing dessert, Ruby's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. "Everything okay?" Richard asked. "It's the lab. There's an issue with one of our tanks. I'm so sorry, but I need to go." Richard immediately stood. "I'll take you." "No, please stay and finish your dessert," Ruby insisted. "I can grab a cab. It's not far." "I'll walk you out," Parker heard himself saying before he could think better of it. "I need to use the restroom anyway." Melissa raised an eyebrow but said nothing as Parker stood and followed Ruby toward the exit. "I'm sorry about cutting the evening short," Ruby said as they walked. "It was lovely meeting you and Melissa." "Is everything okay at your lab?" Parker asked, genuinely concerned. "One of our filtration systems is malfunctioning. Not life-threatening for the specimens, but it needs to be addressed tonight." They reached the restaurant entrance, and Parker gestured to the hostess to call a cab. "It's fascinating work you do," he said. "Richard is lucky to have met you." Ruby's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, Richard and I aren't." The cab pulled up, cutting her off. She looked at it, then back at Parker. "It was really nice meeting you, Parker. I hope we see each other again." "I'm sure we will," he replied, opening the cab door for her. "Richard seems quite taken with you." Something flickered in Ruby's eyes, but she simply smiled and climbed into the cab. Parker watched it drive away, feeling strangely bereft. When he returned to the table, Richard and Melissa were discussing an upcoming charity gala. "Everything okay with Ruby?" Richard asked. "Yes, she's on her way to the lab," Parker replied, sliding back into his seat. "She's wonderful, isn't she?" Richard said with a grin. Parker nodded, guilt washing over him. "She seems great, perfect for you." Richard laughed. "For me? No, Ruby's not my date. She's my cousin's best friend. I brought her because I thought she'd hit it off with you." Parker stared at his friend in confusion. "What about Melissa?" "I assumed Melissa was the one you were setting me up with," Richard said, looking equally confused. Melissa, who had been sipping her wine, nearly choked. "Wait, this was supposed to be a setup." Parker, you told me this was just dinner with your friend. Parker's mind was reeling. Richard, when we planned this, you said you were bringing a date. No, I said I was bringing someone. I thought you were setting me up with Melissa and I was bringing Ruby for you. The three of them stared at each other for a moment before Richard burst out laughing. Well, this is awkward. Melissa didn't seem amused. So I wasn't here as Parker's date. You were, Parker assured her quickly. I just thought, I didn't realize, that you were sending very interested signals to another woman all night, Melissa finished for him, her voice cold. I think I'll call it a night. She stood, gathering her purse. Richard, it was nice meeting you. Parker, don't call me. As Melissa walked away, Parker buried his face in his hands. I am such an idiot. You're not an idiot, Richard said, still chuckling, but you are clearly interested in Ruby. Parker looked up, ready to deny it, but the knowing look in Richard's eyes stopped him. I thought she was your date, he said weakly. And that stopped you from being attracted to her. You're a better man than most, Richard said, raising his glass in a mock toast. So she's not seeing anyone? Parker couldn't help but ask. Not that I know of. My cousin Lily has been trying to set her up for months, but Ruby's been focused on her career. When I mentioned this dinner, Lily practically forced Ruby to come. Richard's expression turned serious. She's a great person, Parker. Smart, funny, passionate about her work. But she's been hurt before, so if you're interested, be careful with her. Parker nodded, his mind already racing ahead to how he could see Ruby again. I need to go after her, explain what happened. You mean you need to go to her lab and play the knight in shining armor? Richard teased. Parker stood, throwing some bills on the table. Cover the check with that, and Richard. Thanks for the worst planned double date in history. Richard laughed. You'll thank me at your wedding. Parker rolled his eyes but couldn't help smiling as he hurried out of the restaurant, pulling out his phone to search for the Oceanic Institute's address. The Oceanic Institute was a modern glass building near the waterfront, its exterior illuminated by soft blue lights that gave it an otherworldly glow. Parker parked his car and approached the main entrance, only to find it locked. A security guard inside motioned for him to use the intercom. Oceanic Institute, how can I help you? A bored voice crackled through the speaker. I'm looking for Ruby Sinclair, Parker said, suddenly realizing how strange this might seem. She had an emergency with one of the tanks. Your name? Parker Collins. I'm a friend of hers. There was a pause then. Wait there. 5 minutes later, Ruby appeared in the lobby, lab coat over her emerald dress, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked surprised to see Parker as she approached the door. Parker, what are you doing here? She asked as she swiped her key card to let him in. I wanted to make sure everything was okay with your tanks, he said, immediately feeling foolish. And to explain about tonight, there was a misunderstanding. Ruby tilted her head, curiosity evident in her expression. What kind of misunderstanding? Can I walk with you to your lab? I promise I won't get in the way. Ruby hesitated, then nodded. Sure. The emergency is under control, but I need to monitor the system for another hour or so. As they walked down a corridor lined with large tanks of colorful fish, Parker explained the mix-up. So Richard thought he was bringing you as a date for me, not for himself, he concluded. And I thought he was bringing you as his date. Ruby stopped walking, turning to face him with an amused expression. That's why you kept talking about how perfect I was for Richard, Parker nodded, embarrassed. I was trying to be a good friend, even though. He trailed off, unsure if he should admit the attraction he'd felt, even though. Ruby prompted, a small smile playing at her lips. Parker took a deep breath. Even though I was attracted to you from the moment you walked in, but I would never act on that if you were with Richard. Ruby's smile widened. That's very honorable of you. She resumed walking, leading him through a door into a large room filled with tanks of various sizes. The soft blue lighting and the gentle bubbling of the water created a peaceful atmosphere. "This is amazing," Parker said, looking around at the diverse marine life. Ruby beamed with pride. "This is my favorite place in the world. Come see the tank that gave us trouble." She led him to a large cylindrical tank in the center of the room. "This houses our seahorse breeding program." Parker peered into the tank, where delicate seahorses drifted gracefully in the water. "They're beautiful." "They are," Ruby agreed, checking some readings on a monitor next to the tank. The filtration system was showing abnormal pH levels, but it seems to be stabilizing now. Parker watched her work, admiring her competence and the gentle way she moved around the tank, clearly mindful of not disturbing its inhabitants. "So," Ruby said casually as she made notes on a clipboard, "you were attracted to me." Parker felt his face warm. "I thought it was obvious." "Maybe, but you were being so careful to point out how perfect Richard and I would be together that I wasn't sure if I was imagining things." "You weren't," Parker admitted. "I felt something when we shook hands, a connection. Did you feel it too?" Ruby set down her clipboard and met his gaze. "I did. But then you kept talking about Richard, and Melissa was clearly your date, so I tried to ignore it. Melissa and I had only been on a few casual dates, nothing serious. And now I'm here, hoping you'll give me a chance to start over. Maybe we could have dinner, just the two of us this time." Ruby smiled, and Parker felt that same flutter in his chest that he'd experienced when he first heard her laugh. "I'd like that," she said. "But first, let me finish up here. Would you like a tour of the facility while we wait?" For the next hour, Parker followed Ruby through the institute, listening as she passionately explained their research and conservation efforts. He was captivated not just by her beauty, but by her intelligence and dedication. "This is the Coral Reef Nursery," Ruby explained as they entered a room with shallow tanks containing colorful coral fragments. "We're cultivating endangered coral species for reintroduction to damaged reefs." "It's incredible," Parker said sincerely. "The colors are amazing." Ruby smiled proudly. "Each color represents a different species. They're delicate ecosystems, just like the buildings you design. Both require balance and harmony to thrive." Parker was struck by the comparison. "I've never thought of it that way, but you're right. We're both trying to create spaces where life can flourish." They shared a smile, and Parker felt that connection growing stronger. As they continued the tour, their hands brushed occasionally, sending tingles up his arm. By the time they returned to the seahorse tank to check the readings one last time, the attraction between them was palpable. "The system is stable," Ruby announced, reviewing the data. "I think we're good to go." "Dinner," Parker suggested. "There's an all-night diner near here that serves great pancakes." Ruby laughed. "Pancakes sound perfect. Let me grab my things." As they walked out of the institute together, Parker felt a sense of rightness that he couldn't explain. Whatever had happened tonight, the mix-up, the unexpected attraction, the seahorse emergency, it all felt like fate. "You know," Ruby said as they reached his car, "Richard is going to be insufferable when he finds out his matchmaking worked." Parker groaned. "He already thinks we'll be getting married." Ruby's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Well, let's at least get through pancakes before we start planning the wedding." Parker laughed, opening the car door for her. "One step at a time, but I have to admit I've got a good feeling about this." "So do I," Ruby said softly, and the look they shared was full of promise. The diner was nearly empty at that late hour, just a few night owls nursing coffees and a tired-looking waitress who brightened when they walked in. Ruby and Parker slid into a booth by the window, where they could see the lights of the city reflecting on the bay. "I can't believe I'm sitting in a diner at midnight in an evening dress," Ruby said, laughing as she studied the laminated menu. "You look beautiful," Parker said sincerely. "The dress is stunning, but it's your passion when you talk about your work that really captivated me tonight." Ruby looked up, a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "Most men I've dated haven't appreciated that. They either find it boring or intimidating that I'm so dedicated to my career." "I understand dedication. My firm is like my baby. I've built it from nothing to one of the most respected architectural firms in the city." "Tell me about your firm," Ruby said, setting down her menu. "How did you get started?" As they ordered their pancakes and coffee, Parker told Ruby about founding Collins Architecture 7 years ago, after working for a large commercial firm where he felt creatively stifled. "I wanted to focus on sustainable design, buildings that work with nature instead of against it," he explained. "Everyone told me it was career suicide that developers wouldn't pay extra for green features, but I was stubborn. And now we have a waiting list of clients who specifically want environmentally responsible buildings. Turns out doing the right thing can also be good business." Their pancakes arrived, golden and steaming, and they continued talking as they ate. Parker learned that Ruby had grown up in a small coastal town, the daughter of a fisherman and a teacher, and had fallen in love with marine biology during tide pool explorations with her father. "He taught me to respect the ocean," she said, her eyes distant with memory. "To understand that we're just visitors in their world." "Is he still fishing?" Ruby's expression sobered. "No, he passed away 5 years ago, heart attack on his boat." Parker reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry. Thank you." He would have loved the work I'm doing now, especially the conservation programs. Their conversation flowed effortlessly from personal histories to professional passions, from favorite books to embarrassing childhood stories. By the time they finished their pancakes, Parker felt like he'd known Ruby for years, not hours. "So how did you meet Richard?" Ruby asked as they sipped their coffee. "He said you've been friends since college." Parker smiled, remembering. "Freshman year economics class." He was this cocky rich kid who showed up late every day but somehow aced all the tests. I was the scholarship student who never missed a class and studied constantly. We should have hated each other. But instead, we ended up as lab partners and discovered we had more in common than we thought. We both wanted to make our mark on the world, just in different ways. He through his family's shipping business, me through architecture. And now he's one of the youngest shipping magnates in the country, and you're a successful architect. Sounds like you both achieved your goals." Parker nodded. "Richard's done well for himself, built on what his father started and expanded it exponentially. The media likes to focus on his wealth and his yacht and his dating life, but he's also one of the most generous people I know. That donation to your institute wasn't a publicity stunt." "I know," Ruby said. "I've worked with enough wealthy donors to tell the difference between those who care and those who just want the tax write-off. Richard genuinely cares about our work." "He's a good friend," Parker agreed, "even if his matchmaking methods are unorthodox." Ruby laughed. "Well, I can't argue with the results." The warmth in her eyes made Parker's heart race. There was an undeniable chemistry between them, a pull that he hadn't felt with anyone in a long time, maybe ever. "It's getting late," Ruby said reluctantly, glancing at her watch. "I should probably get home." "I have an early meeting tomorrow." Parker nodded, signaling for the check. "Can I drive you home?" "That would be nice." Outside, the night had grown cooler and Ruby shivered in her thin dress. Without hesitation, Parker slipped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, pulling it closer around her. "Such a gentleman." "My mother raised me right," Parker said with a smile. "She'd be horrified if I let a lady freeze." They drove through the quiet city streets, Ruby giving directions to her apartment in a converted warehouse near the waterfront. The building was industrial chic, with large windows and exposed brick. "This is me," she said as Parker pulled up in front. "Would you like to come up for a coffee?" "Or is that too forward?" Parker smiled. "Not too forward at all. I'd like that." Ruby's apartment was a reflection of her personality, warm, eclectic, and filled with life. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with marine biology texts and novels. A large aquarium dominated another wall, housing a miniature reef ecosystem complete with colorful fish and coral. "Make yourself comfortable," Ruby said, gesturing to the living area as she headed to the kitchen. "I'll put on some coffee." Parker wandered over to the aquarium, mesmerized by the vibrant life within. "This is beautiful," he called to Ruby. "Did you create this yourself?" "Yes, it's my hobby and my stress relief," she replied, coming to stand beside him. After a long day of scientific observation, it's nice to just sit and watch something beautiful without analyzing it. "I understand that. I have a sketch pad by my bed. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and just draw whatever comes to mind. No blueprints or measurements, just pure creativity." They stood side by side, watching the fish swim lazily through the coral formations. Parker was acutely aware of Ruby beside him, of the scent of her perfume, of the way her shoulder occasionally brushed against his arm. "Parker," she said softly, turning to face him. "I don't usually feel this comfortable with someone I just met. It's a little scary. Scary good or scary bad?" He asked, meeting her gaze. "Good, I think, but I've been hurt before. My last relationship ended badly because he couldn't understand why I would waste my life studying fish." "He sounds like an idiot," Parker said, which earned him a laugh. He was, but it left me cautious. Parker nodded, understanding. "I respect that. We can take this as slow as you want. I'd just like the chance to know you better." Ruby smiled, her green eyes warm with appreciation. "I'd like that too." The coffee maker beeped, breaking the moment. Ruby went to pour them each a cup, and they settled on her comfortable couch, talking late into the night. By the time Parker reluctantly said he should go, the first hints of dawn were lightening the sky. "Can I see you again?" he asked as they stood at her door. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't," Ruby replied with a smile. Parker leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and brushed his lips gently against hers. The kiss was brief but filled with promise, sending a shiver of anticipation through him. "Good night, Ruby," he said, pulling back reluctantly. "Good morning, actually," she corrected, gesturing to the lightening sky. "Call me later, definitely," Parker promised, stepping into the hallway. As he drove home through the awakening city, Parker couldn't wipe the smile from his face. What had started as a favor to his friend, a simple double date, had turned into something unexpected and wonderful. He couldn't wait to see where it would lead. Over the next few weeks, Parker and Ruby saw each other whenever their busy schedules allowed. He took her to his favorite rooftop restaurant, where they lingered over dinner, talking until the staff politely informed them they were closing. She invited him to a behind-the-scenes tour of the aquarium, where they held hands like teenagers as they wandered through the underwater tunnels. On their fourth date, Parker took Ruby sailing on a small boat he borrowed from a client. It was a perfect day, the sun warm on their skin, the bay sparkling around them. "You're a natural," Ruby observed as Parker confidently adjusted the sails. "You said you haven't sailed in years." "It's like riding a bike," he replied, grinning as the boat picked up speed. "My grandfather would be proud to see I haven't forgotten everything he taught me." They anchored in a quiet cove where they swam and picnicked on the deck. As the afternoon waned, they lay side by side, talking about their dreams and fears. I've always wanted to design a building that would still be standing 100 years from now, Parker admitted. Something that would make a positive impact on the city and the people who use it. That's a beautiful ambition, Ruby said, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. I think you'll do it. The conviction in her voice touched him. What about you? What's your big dream? Ruby's eyes grew distant. To make a difference in ocean conservation before it's too late. So much damage has already been done, and most people don't even realize it because it's happening beneath the surface. Is that why you're working on the coral reef restoration project? She nodded. Coral reefs are dying at an alarming rate, but they're crucial to ocean health. If we can develop more effective restoration techniques, we might be able to reverse some of the damage. Parker watched her face as she spoke, captivated by her passion and determination. In that moment, he knew he was falling in love with her. As the weeks turned into months, Parker and Ruby's relationship deepened. They met each other's friends, spent weekends together, and seamlessly integrated their lives. Richard took full credit for their happiness, reminding them at every opportunity that his brilliant matchmaking had brought them together. We should set him up with someone, Ruby suggested one evening as they cooked dinner in Parker's spacious kitchen. Return the favor, Parker chuckled. Richard is notoriously picky. Plus, he's still gun-shy after that disaster with Vanessa. Richard's ex had been a model with social climbing ambitions who'd sold details of their relationship to a tabloid when they broke up. The experience had left Richard wary of dating anyone in the public eye. What about my friend Lily? Ruby suggested, chopping vegetables for the salad. She's smart, down to earth, and definitely not interested in his money. She's an elementary school teacher. That might actually work, Parker said thoughtfully. Richard has a soft spot for teachers. His mother was one. They decided to host a dinner party the following weekend, inviting Richard, Lily, and a few other friends. As Parker watched Ruby move around his kitchen with comfortable familiarity, he realized how natural it felt to have her in his home, in his life. They hadn't officially moved in together, but Ruby stayed over most nights, and a growing collection of her things had found their way into his closet and bathroom. The dinner party was a success, with good food, flowing wine, and easy conversation. Parker and Ruby exchanged knowing glances as they observed Richard and Lily deep in conversation on the balcony, clearly hitting it off. We might be as good at matchmaking as Richard thinks he is, Ruby whispered to Parker as they cleared dessert plates. He'll never let us hear the end of it if they start dating, Parker replied with a grin. After their guests had left, Parker and Ruby cleaned up together, working in comfortable silence. As Ruby loaded the last of the dishes into the dishwasher, Parker came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to her neck. "Move in with me," he said softly. Ruby turned in his arms, surprise evident in her expression. "What? Move in with me?" Parker repeated. "Half your stuff is already here. It's silly for you to keep paying rent on your apartment when you're here most nights anyway. Are you asking because it's practical or because you want to live with me?" Ruby asked, her eyes searching his. "Both," Parker admitted. "It is practical, but more importantly, I love waking up with you. I love coming home to you. I love our life together and I want more of it." A slow smile spread across Ruby's face. "When you put it that way, how can I say no?" Parker kissed her then, lifting her off her feet in his excitement. Ruby's laughter echoed through the apartment, a sound that never failed to make his heart soar. Moving Ruby into Parker's penthouse apartment took less time than they expected. She had already been gradually bringing over her clothes and personal items, so it was mainly furniture and her beloved aquarium that needed to be relocated. Parker cleared out his home office, converting it into a space where Ruby could work from home when needed, complete with a smaller version of her aquarium. "You didn't have to give up your office for me," Ruby protested when she saw what he'd done. "I can work at the dining table when I'm home," Parker insisted. "You need a proper space for your research." Their domestic life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings were a dance of shared showers and quick breakfasts before they headed to their respective jobs. Evenings were for cooking together, sharing the day's events and planning for the future. Weekends were for adventures, hiking in nearby parks, exploring art galleries, or simply lounging at home with books and quiet companionship. 6 months into their relationship, Richard invited them to the launch of his newest ship, a state-of-the-art container vessel designed with environmental considerations in mind. "I can't believe Richard of all people is going green," Ruby remarked as they dressed for the event. "Your influence," Parker said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "He started taking environmental issues seriously after meeting you. That's why he's named the ship after you." The RS Ocean Guardian was Richard's pride and joy, a ship that incorporated the latest in fuel efficiency and pollution reduction technology. "It's not named after me," Ruby protested, though she was clearly touched by the gesture. "The RS stands for responsible shipping." "Of course it does," Parker agreed with a wink. "Just like it's a coincidence that the ship has the same initials as Ruby Sinclair." The launch was a lavish affair, with hundreds of guests gathered at the shipyard. Richard, looking distinguished in his tailored suit, made a speech about the importance of responsible business practices and the shipping industry's role in protecting the oceans. He publicly thanked Ruby for her consultation on the environmental features of the ship, calling her forward to help him break the ceremonial bottle of champagne across the bow. Parker watched proudly as Ruby spoke briefly about the importance of corporate responsibility in ocean conservation. She was radiant in a blue dress that matched the sea behind her, confident and passionate as she addressed the crowd. Later, as they mingled with the other guests, Richard pulled Parker aside. "So, when are you going to make it official?" he asked, nodding toward Ruby, who was chatting with Lily across the room. "Make what official?" Parker asked, though he knew what his friend meant. Richard rolled his eyes. "Don't play dumb. You two are perfect together. You're practically married already. When are you going to propose?" Parker sighed. "I've been thinking about it, but it's only been 6 months. Isn't that too soon?" "Since when are you a conventional guy?" Richard challenged. "When you know, you know, and you know." Parker couldn't argue with that. He had known from their first real date that Ruby was special, different from anyone he'd ever met. He had been designing a ring in his mind for months, sketching ideas when Ruby wasn't looking. "I want it to be perfect," he admitted to Richard. "She deserves that." "She deserves you," Richard said, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "And you deserve her. Don't overthink it." As they rejoined the party, Parker watched Ruby laugh at something Lily said, her head thrown back, her green eyes sparkling. In that moment, he made his decision. Richard was right. When you know, you know. The following week, Parker began putting his plan into action. He contacted a jeweler friend who specialized in custom designs, sharing his sketches for a ring that incorporated elements of both architecture and marine life, a platinum band with a wave pattern that held a center diamond, flanked by small blue sapphires. "It's beautiful," the jeweler said, examining Parker's design. "Very unique. She must be a special woman." "She is," Parker agreed, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement at the thought of proposing. While the ring was being made, Parker focused on planning the perfect proposal. He wanted it to be meaningful, personal, and unexpected. After considering and discarding several ideas, inspiration struck when Ruby mentioned that the Oceanic Institute was planning a fundraising gala at the aquarium. They're opening the new deep-sea exhibit that night, she explained over dinner. It's going to be spectacular. We've recreated a bioluminescent ecosystem. That sounds amazing, Parker said, his mind already working on how to incorporate the exhibit into his proposal plan. With Richard's help and the cooperation of Ruby's boss at the Institute, Parker arranged to have special access to the exhibit before it opened to the public. Richard, in his capacity as a major donor, would request a private tour, bringing Parker along as his guest. Ruby would naturally be asked to conduct the tour, as one of the scientists involved in creating the exhibit. The night of the gala arrived, and Parker was a bundle of nerves as he and Ruby prepared to leave for the event. The ring box felt conspicuous in his pocket, though he knew Ruby couldn't see it. "You look beautiful," he told her as she emerged from their bedroom in a floor-length gown the color of the deep ocean. "And you clean up nicely yourself," she replied, straightening his bow tie. "Ready to schmooze with potential donors?" "I'm always ready to support your work," Parker said, kissing her lightly to avoid smudging her lipstick. They arrived at the aquarium to find it transformed. The usual family-friendly space had been converted into an elegant venue, with soft lighting, classical music, and waiters circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Ruby was immediately pulled away by her boss to meet some important guests, leaving Parker free to confirm the final details of his plan with Richard. "Everything's set," Richard assured him, appearing at his elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "Dr. Harmon will ask Ruby to give us a private preview of the exhibit at 9 o'clock. The photographer will be in position, and I've arranged for her parents to be watching via video call." Parker raised an eyebrow. "Her parents? How did you manage that?" Richard shrugged. "I have my ways." "Actually, I just called them and explained the plan. Her mother cried, by the way. They're very excited." Parker took a deep breath, his nervousness giving way to determination. This was right. Ruby was the one. Everything else was just details. At precisely 9 o'clock, Dr. Harmon approached Ruby with Parker and Richard in tow. "Ruby, Richard has requested a private viewing of the new exhibit before we open it to the other guests. Would you mind giving them a tour?" Ruby looked surprised but pleased. "Of course. The lighting sequence is all programmed and ready to go." She led them through a set of doors marked "Staff Only" and down a corridor to the entrance of the new exhibit. As they stepped inside, the regular lights dimmed, and the bioluminescent displays began to activate, creating a magical blue-green glow throughout the space. "This is incredible," Parker breathed, genuinely awed by the beauty of the exhibit. Tanks on all sides housed creatures that produced their own light, creating a surreal, otherworldly atmosphere. Ruby launched into an explanation of the deep-sea ecosystem, her face animated with enthusiasm as she pointed out different species and their adaptations for life in the darkness. Parker listened, enchanted not just by the exhibit but by her passion for it. They moved deeper into the exhibit, where a central circular tank dominated the space. Inside, jellyfish pulsed with ethereal blue light as they drifted through the water. "This is my favorite part," Ruby said softly. "These jellyfish are so delicate, yet they've survived in one of the harshest environments on Earth for millions of years." Richard cleared his throat. "I just remembered. I promised Lily I'd meet her by the sea turtle exhibit. Parker, you'll be okay finishing the tour without me." Ruby looked confused. "We can all go back." No, Richard interrupted smoothly. "You two finish here. This is fascinating, really. I just promised Lily." With a wink at Parker that thankfully Ruby didn't see, Richard backed out of the exhibit, leaving them alone. Ruby turned to Parker with a bemused expression. "That was weird. Richard was the one who wanted the tour." Maybe he wanted us to have a moment alone, Parker suggested, his heart pounding as he took her hands in his. This place is magical. It is, Ruby agreed, looking around at the glowing displays. It's like being at the bottom of the ocean. Ruby, Parker began, his voice soft but steady. From the moment you walked into that restaurant 6 months ago, you've brought light into my life. Just like these creatures illuminate the darkness of the deep sea, you've illuminated parts of me I didn't even know existed. Ruby's eyes widened as she began to understand what was happening. Parker, he continued, squeezing her hands gently. You've taught me to see the world differently, to appreciate the beauty in things I once overlooked. You've challenged me, supported me, and loved me in ways I never thought possible. Slowly, Parker lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands. From his pocket, he produced the ring box and opened it, revealing the custom-designed ring glittering in the bioluminescent light. Ruby Sinclair, I want to build a life with you, a life as beautiful and extraordinary as you are. Will you marry me? Tears shimmered in Ruby's eyes, catching the blue-green light from the jellyfish tank. For a moment, she seemed speechless, her hand covering her mouth. Yes, she finally whispered, then louder. Yes, Parker, yes. Parker slipped the ring onto her finger with slightly shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply as the jellyfish pulsed with light around them. A flash went off, breaking the moment, and they turned to see a photographer capturing the scene. Behind him, a tablet had been set up on a stand, showing Ruby's parents watching with tear-filled smiles. Mom, Dad, Ruby gasped, moving toward the screen. Surprise, sweetheart, her mother said, wiping away tears. Parker wanted us to be part of this special moment. Ruby turned to Parker with wonder in her eyes. You arranged all this, with some help from Richard and your boss, Parker admitted. Was it okay? Too much? It was perfect, Ruby assured him, throwing her arms around his neck. Absolutely perfect. The doors to the exhibit opened then, revealing Richard, Lily, Dr. Harmon, and several of Ruby's colleagues, all applauding and cheering. She said yes, Parker announced unnecessarily, his face split in a wide grin. The group surrounded them with hugs and congratulations, and someone produced champagne for a toast. As they celebrated in the glow of the bioluminescent creatures, Parker couldn't take his eyes off Ruby. Her face radiant with joy, the ring sparkling on her finger, she was more beautiful than he had ever seen her. Richard clapped him on the shoulder. Told you it would work out, he said smugly. Parker laughed. Yes, you're the world's greatest matchmaker. We'll be sure to mention that in our wedding vows. Speaking of weddings, Richard said, lowering his voice, I may have already booked my yacht for the reception, just in case. You're unbelievable, Parker said, shaking his head in amusement. You can thank me later, Richard replied with a wink before moving away to join Lily. Ruby returned to Parker's side, slipping her arm around his waist. What was that about? Richard being Richard, Parker said, kissing the top of her head. Apparently, we're having our wedding reception on his yacht. Ruby laughed. Of course we are. Would you expect anything less? As long as I'm marrying you, Parker said softly, we could have the reception in a parking lot for all I care. Ruby looked up at him, her eyes shining with love. I feel the same way. But a yacht does sound nice. They laughed together, surrounded by friends and the magical glow of the deep-sea creatures, the beginning of their engagement marked by the same warmth and joy that had characterized their relationship from the start. The months following their engagement were a whirlwind of wedding planning, work commitments, and building their life together. Ruby threw herself into research for a major grant proposal, while Parker's firm was commissioned to design a new eco-friendly corporate headquarters for a tech giant. Despite their busy schedules, they made time for their relationship, instituting a weekly date night where work talk was banned, and they focused solely on each other. Sometimes these dates were elaborate dinner at exclusive restaurants or weekend getaways to wine country, but often they were simple pleasures. Cooking a new recipe together, walking along the waterfront at sunset, or curling up with a movie and takeout. "I was thinking," Parker said during one such evening as they sat on their balcony watching the city lights twinkle across the bay. "What would you think about building a house instead of living in the apartment after we're married?" Ruby looked surprised. "A house? In the city?" Parker nodded. "I've been sketching some ideas. A modern design with sustainable features, lots of natural light, and of course, space for a much larger aquarium." Ruby's eyes lit up at the mention of a larger aquarium. "That sounds amazing, but city property is so expensive." "I've actually been saving for years to buy land and build my own home," Parker admitted. "I just never found the right spot or the right reason. Now I have both." He showed her the sketches he'd been working on. A sleek, modern home with living walls, solar panels, and large windows offering views of the bay. The master bedroom featured a wall-length aquarium, and there was a dedicated space for Ruby's home office with built-in tanks for her research specimens. "Parker, this is..." Ruby's voice caught as she studied the drawings. "This is incredible. You designed this for us." "For our future," he confirmed, "including space for a nursery when we're ready." Ruby looked up from the sketches, her expression soft. "You want children with you?" "Absolutely. Not right away, but eventually." Parker paused, suddenly uncertain. "Unless you don't want, I do," Ruby assured him quickly. "I've always wanted children, I just wasn't sure if you did." Parker took her hand, running his thumb over the engagement ring. "I want it all with you, Ruby. The house, the kids, growing old together. Everything." Ruby leaned over and kissed him deeply. "Then let's build our dream house." They found the perfect piece of land on a hillside overlooking the bay, just a 30-minute drive from both the Oceanic Institute and Parker's office. The property was overgrown and had an old, dilapidated cottage that would need to be demolished, but the location and views were ideal. "We can incorporate rainwater collection," Parker explained as they walked the property. "Solar panels on the south-facing roof, geothermal heating and cooling. It will be as close to net zero energy usage as possible. And we can use native plants for the landscaping," Ruby added, already envisioning their life there. "Create a habitat for local wildlife." They purchased the land and began the lengthy process of permits, approvals, and detailed architectural plans. Parker threw himself into the project with enthusiasm, treating their home as his most important design yet. Meanwhile, wedding plans continued to take shape. True to his word, Richard had offered his yacht for the reception, but the ceremony itself would be held on a secluded beach near Ruby's hometown, where her father had taught her to love the ocean. "It feels right to get married there," Ruby explained to Parker's mother over dinner one evening. "Like Dad will be with us somehow." Patricia Collins, a warm, elegant woman who had immediately taken Ruby into her heart, reached across the table to squeeze her future daughter-in-law's hand. "I think that's beautiful, dear, and we'll make sure there's a photo of him prominently displayed." The wedding was set for early September, when the weather would still be warm but past the height of tourist season. Ruby chose a simple but elegant gown that would work for a beach ceremony, and Parker selected a light-colored suit that wouldn't be too hot in the sunshine. As the big day approached, their lives grew increasingly hectic. The house construction had begun, wedding details needed finalizing, and both of their careers demanded attention. Yet through it all, they remained each other's calm center, supporting and encouraging one another. The night before they were to leave for the wedding destination, Parker found Ruby sitting on their balcony, looking pensive as she gazed at the stars. "Pre-wedding jitters?" he asked, sitting beside her and handing her a glass of wine. Ruby smiled and shook her head. "Not at all. Just thinking about how much my life has changed in a year. If Richard hadn't brought me to that double date, I'd have found you somehow," Parker said with conviction. "Maybe at a charity event or through work. We were meant to meet." "You really believe that, in fate?" Ruby asked, her expression curious. "I didn't used to," Parker admitted. "I was all about making my own path, controlling my own destiny, but meeting you, falling in love with you, it feels like more than just random chance." Ruby leaned her head on his shoulder. "I've been offered a position," she said after a moment. "Director of Marine Conservation for the Institute. It would mean more responsibility, more impact on the programs we develop." "Ruby, that's amazing," Parker exclaimed, turning to face her. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She looked down at her wine glass. "It would also mean more hours, more travel. I was worried about the timing with the wedding and the house and potentially starting a family in the future." Parker took her hands in his. "Listen to me. Your career is important. This position sounds perfect for you. We'll make it work, whatever it takes. You're sure? It won't be easy." "The best things in life rarely are," Parker said, kissing her softly. "I love you, Ruby Sinclair, soon to be Ruby Collins. Your dreams are my dreams now, and I'll support you in achieving them just as you support me." Relief washed over Ruby's face. "I love you too. I'll tell Dr. Harmon I accept." "We should celebrate," Parker declared, refilling their wine glasses. To the future director of Marine Conservation and her incredibly supportive architect husband. They clinked glasses, both feeling the exciting potential of their future together stretching out before them like the vast, beautiful ocean. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, with just enough of a breeze to take the edge off the late summer heat. The small beach where the ceremony would take place had been transformed with simple, elegant decorations. White chairs on the sand, an arch of local wildflowers and driftwood, and paths marked with seashells. Parker stood at the altar, Richard by his side as best man, watching as Ruby's mother was escorted to her seat in the front row. His own parents sat opposite, his father giving him a proud nod and his mother already dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. The small string quartet began playing, and the guests rose as Ruby appeared at the end of the aisle, escorted by her uncle. Parker's breath caught in his throat. She was radiant in her simple white gown, her auburn hair adorned with tiny white flowers, carrying a bouquet of native blooms and sea lavender. As she walked toward him, their eyes locked, and everything else seemed to fade away. The nervous anticipation Parker had felt all morning dissolved into pure joy. This was right. This was perfect. "You're beautiful," he whispered as she reached him and her uncle placed her hand in his. "So are you," she whispered back, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They had written their own vows, promises of love, support, and partnership that moved many of their guests to tears. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Parker kissed Ruby with all the love in his heart, sealing their commitment as their friends and family applauded. The reception on Richard's yacht was everything they could have hoped for, elegant but relaxed, with excellent food, flowing champagne, and a dance floor that was never empty. As the evening progressed, they slipped away from the festivities to share a quiet moment on the upper deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold. "Mrs. Collins," Parker said, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind. "I like the sound of that," Ruby replied, leaning back against him. "Though professionally, I'll still use Sinclair." Dr. Ruby Sinclair Collins, Director of Marine Conservation, Parker said with pride. It has a nice ring to it. Ruby turned in his arms to face him. Thank you for understanding about that. Some men might feel threatened by their wife's ambition. I'm not some men, Parker reminded her. Your success is our success. Besides, I'm pretty ambitious myself. We're a power couple, Ruby agreed with a laugh. Saving the oceans and designing sustainable buildings, one day at a time. Parker kissed her softly. And building a beautiful life together. They returned to the reception to cut the cake and share their first dance as husband and wife. As they moved across the dance floor to a slow ballad, Parker held Ruby close, marveling at how perfectly they fit together, how right this all felt. Richard approached them as the song ended, his arm around Lily, who had indeed become his girlfriend after that fateful dinner party. If you two name your firstborn after me, I won't say I told you so for the rest of our lives, he offered magnanimously. Ruby laughed. That's a tempting offer, but I'm not sure Parker Jr. would appreciate being named Richard. Parker Jr., Parker repeated, raising an eyebrow. Or Parker Et, Ruby amended with a grin. We'll see. The four of them laughed together, and as the evening continued, Parker found himself filled with gratitude for his best friend's misguided attempt at matchmaking that had led to this perfect moment. After a 2-week honeymoon exploring the Mediterranean, where they combined Ruby's interest in marine ecosystems with Parker's love of architecture, they returned to San Francisco and the reality of their busy lives. Ruby dove into her new role at the Institute, while Parker juggled the demands of his firm with overseeing the construction of their home. The months flew by in a blur of work commitments, house decisions, and settling into married life. There were challenges, of course, late nights at the office, disagreements over tile choices, learning each other's quirks and habits, but through it all, their partnership remained strong. A year after their wedding, they finally moved into their completed home. It was everything they had envisioned. A modern, sustainable retreat with breathtaking views and thoughtful details that reflected both their personalities. It's perfect, Ruby declared as they stood in their finished living room, the large aquarium that divided the space from the dining area already filled with colorful fish. Worth every minute of planning and all those arguments about cabinet handles. Parker laughed, remembering their most heated design disagreement. You were right about those, by the way. These do look better. I'm recording this moment for posterity, Ruby teased. Parker Collins admits his wife was right. Don't get used to it, he warned, pulling her into his arms. But seriously, I'm glad we created this together. It feels like us. They celebrated their first night in their new home with a quiet dinner on the terrace, watching the lights of the city twinkle below them. As they sipped their wine, Ruby grew quiet, a small smile playing at her lips. I have something to tell you, she said finally. I wasn't going to say anything yet, but I can't wait any longer. Parker set down his glass, his heart racing at the look on her face. What is it? Ruby took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. We're going to need that nursery sooner than we thought. Parker stared at her for a moment, processing her words, then broke into a wide grin. You're pregnant. We're having a baby, Ruby nodded, her eyes shining with happy tears. About 8 weeks along. I found out right before we moved in, but I wanted to wait until we were settled to tell you. Parker pulled her into his arms, his own eyes misting over. A baby, he repeated in wonder. Our baby. As they held each other under the stars, Parker thought back to that fateful double date, arranged by his well-meaning but clueless friend. How could he have known then that the woman Richard brought would become his wife, the mother of his child, the center of his world? What are you thinking about? Ruby asked, noticing his faraway expression. Just that I never expected any of this when I agreed to that double date, Parker admitted. I never expected you. Ruby smiled, reaching up to touch his face. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we don't see coming. Like you, Parker agreed, placing a gentle hand on her stomach. And like this little one. As they sat together, planning and dreaming about their future family, Parker knew with absolute certainty that he had found his perfect match in Ruby. Their story had begun with a misunderstanding, but it had grown into something beautiful and true, a love neither of them had expected, but both had embraced with open hearts. 6 months later, Ruby stood in the completed nursery, arranging stuffed sea creatures in the crib, while Parker assembled the rocking chair. The room, painted in soothing shades of blue and green, featured a mural of ocean life that Parker had commissioned from a local artist. "Do you think the whale is too big?" Ruby asked, stepping back to assess the plush blue whale she'd placed in the corner of the crib. "I don't want it to be a suffocation hazard. We'll take it out once the baby actually arrives," Parker assured her. "For now, it looks cute." Ruby's hand went to her rounded belly as she felt a kick. "Someone's active today. I think she's practicing her swimming already." They had decided not to learn the baby's sex, preferring the surprise, but Ruby had a strong feeling they were having a girl. Parker claimed not to have a preference, though Ruby had caught him looking at tiny dresses with a soft expression when they'd gone shopping for baby clothes. "Richard called earlier," Parker said as he tightened a bolt on the chair. "He wanted to know if we'd decided on a name yet." "I think he's still holding out hope for Richard or Richarda," Ruby laughed. "Not happening, but speaking of Richard, did he tell you his news?" "What news?" "He's going to propose to Lily. He called me for advice on the ring." Parker looked up in surprise. "Seriously?" "Richard Davenport, confirmed bachelor, is going to propose. Looks like we started a trend," Ruby said with a smile. "He said seeing how happy we are made him realize what he was missing." "Well, I'll be damned," Parker said, shaking his head in wonder. "First he accidentally becomes a matchmaker for us, and now we've inadvertently done the same for him." Ruby eased herself down onto the window seat, watching as Parker finished assembling the chair. "It's a good thing, though. Lily's perfect for him. She keeps him grounded." Parker nodded in agreement. "They balance each other out like we do." He stood and tested the chair, rocking gently. "Seems sturdy enough. Want to try it?" Ruby moved to the chair and sat down, sighing with pleasure as she rocked. "This is perfect. I can already imagine sitting here, feeding the baby in the middle of the night." Parker knelt beside her, placing his hand on her belly. 3 more months and our little seahorse will be here." "Seahorse," Ruby repeated with a laugh. "Well, we can't keep calling the baby it, and you didn't like Bean or Peanut. Since you're the marine biologist in the family, I thought seahorse was appropriate." Ruby considered this, then nodded. "I like it. Seahorse it is until we meet him or her." As they sat together in the nursery, planning and dreaming, Parker felt a sense of contentment that he'd never experienced before. His life with Ruby was everything he could have hoped for and more. From that first mistaken double date to this moment, preparing for their child's arrival, every step of their journey had felt right. "I love you," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Both of you." Ruby leaned into his touch, her eyes closing in contentment. "We love you too." 3 months later, after a labor that lasted 14 hours, Parker held his daughter for the first time. Lily Patricia Collins had her mother's auburn hair and her father's blue eyes, and Parker was certain she was the most perfect baby ever born. "She's beautiful," he whispered, cradling her carefully as he sat beside Ruby's hospital bed. "Just like her mother." Ruby smiled tiredly, reaching out to touch their daughter's tiny hand. "She has your nose, poor thing." Parker laughed softly. My mother will be thrilled. She's always said the Collins nose is a mark of distinction. There was a knock at the door and Richard peeked in. Is it safe to come in? Are we meeting the newest Collins? Come in, Ruby called. We want you to meet your goddaughter. Richard entered, followed by Lily, both of them bearing gifts, a massive bouquet of flowers and a stuffed seahorse. Goddaughter, Richard repeated, his expression softening as he approached the bed. You want me to be her godfather? Who better than the man responsible for us meeting? Parker said, carefully transferring his daughter to Richard's arms. Richard, meet Lily Patricia Collins. Richard looked from the baby to his fiancée in surprise. You named her after Lily. And my mother, Parker confirmed. We wanted to honor the people who helped bring us together. Richard looked down at the baby with wonder, and Lily peered over his shoulder, her eyes filling with tears. I'm honored, she said softly. She's beautiful. Do you want to hold your namesake? Richard asked, carefully passing the baby to his fiancée. As they watched their friends coo over their daughter, Parker put his arm around Ruby's shoulders. We did good, he murmured. We did, she agreed, leaning against him. And to think none of this would have happened if Richard hadn't brought me to that double date. I'm never going to hear the end of this, am I? Parker groaned, though there was no real annoyance in his tone. Not a chance, Richard confirmed from across the room. I'm going to remind you both at every opportunity that I am the master matchmaker who created this family. They all laughed, and as Parker looked around the room at his wife, his newborn daughter, and the friends who had become family, he felt overwhelming gratitude. What had begun as a simple favor, arranging a double date for his millionaire friend, had resulted in the greatest gift of his life. A love he'd never expected, but now couldn't imagine living without. And as baby Lily grasped his finger with her tiny hand, Parker knew that this was just the beginning of their story. There would be challenges ahead, sleepless nights, career decisions, and all the complexities of raising a child, but he and Ruby would face them together, just as they had every obstacle since that first fateful night. Thank you, he said to Richard, sincerity in his voice. For bringing Ruby that night, for the mix-up, for everything. Richard's usual smugness softened into genuine emotion. You're welcome. You two were meant for each other. I just helped speed things along. As the afternoon sun streamed through the hospital window, casting a golden glow over his family, Parker knew that Richard was right. Some things were simply meant to be, even if they came in the most unexpected packages, like a millionaire's friend arranging a double date, never expecting to fall for the girl his friend brought.